Have you ever trusted someone enough to welcome them into your home, only to discover they were quietly planning to destroy your family from the inside? What would you do if the man your daughter loved wasn't just cheating on her, but was secretly preparing to steal everything she'd worked for? Most people would explode in anger. I didn't. I smiled. And that's exactly why he never saw what was coming. By the time my son-in-law realized he'd walked straight into my trap, every move he'd made had already been recorded, every lie had been documented, and every escape route had disappeared. He thought he was hunting an old man. He never realized the old man was hunting him. Before we begin, if you've ever believed that betrayal deserves consequences, not revenge fueled by rage, but justice earned through patience, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay until the very end. Because today's story proves that sometimes the quietest people deliver the loudest justice. My name is Daniel Carter, and for 62 years I've lived by one simple rule. Never make decisions when you're angry. Anger clouds judgment. Patience sharpens it. My wife Evelyn likes to joke that I could sleep through a thunderstorm without opening one eye. After 33 years of marriage, she still laughs at my terrible jokes, still beats me at crossword puzzles, and still insists I snore loud enough to scare away burglars. Maybe she's right. We built a comfortable life together in a quiet neighborhood outside Tampa. Nothing extravagant, just a beautiful home, a backyard shaded by old oak trees, and a family that meant everything to me. Most men measure their success by money. I measured mine by my daughters. 3 incredible women. Claire, the oldest, possessed the sharp mind of a successful businesswoman. Natalie, the middle child, never missed a single detail. She could read people the way accountants read numbers. And then there was my youngest, Emma, my little girl. No matter how old she became, she'd always be the tiny blonde-haired child who used to fall asleep on my shoulder after Sunday barbecues. Watching your daughter grow into a woman is strange. You spend years teaching her how the world works. Then one day, you have to trust the world with her. That's the hardest lesson any father ever learns. When Emma introduced us to Ethan Brooks, she couldn't stop smiling. "Dad," she whispered before bringing him inside, "I really think he's the one." I looked through the front window as a sleek black luxury SUV rolled into the driveway. A sharply dressed man stepped out wearing an expensive tailored suit, polished shoes, and a smile that looked almost rehearsed. He walked confidently toward the porch. Too confidently. His handshake was firm. His compliments arrived effortlessly. "Mr. Carter, Emma has told me so much about you. It's an honor to finally meet the man who raised such an incredible woman." Every sentence sounded perfect. Almost too perfect. Years working in construction had taught me something many people never learn. Wood creaks before it breaks. Concrete cracks before it collapses. People do exactly the same thing. Most just aren't paying attention. While everyone admired Ethan's charm, I noticed something different. His eyes. They never stayed still. They weren't curious. They were calculating. Every few seconds his gaze drifted around the room, our family photographs, the hallway, the office door, the antique cabinet, even the hallway leading toward my study. He wasn't appreciating the house. He was memorizing it. The feeling settled deep in my stomach like a cold stone. Nothing I could prove. Just instinct. That night, after Emma and Ethan left, Evelyn dried the last dinner plate while I stood silently at the kitchen sink. "So?" she asked with a knowing smile. "What do you think?" I stared out the window into the dark backyard. "I think," I said slowly, "he smiles with his mouth." She laughed. "Isn't that where smiles usually happen?" I shook my head. "No, the genuine ones start in the eyes." For the first time in decades, I hoped my instincts were wrong. Because if they weren't, my daughter's greatest love was about to become the greatest threat our family had ever faced. A funny thing happens when you ignore your instincts. At first, you convince yourself you're being unfair. Then you tell yourself you're simply overprotective. Eventually, you stop listening altogether. That's exactly what I did. For nearly 2 years, I buried that uneasy feeling every time Ethan Brooks walked through my front door. Emma was happy. That was enough for me. Or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. The wedding took place on a warm spring evening beneath towering oak trees draped with white lights. Everything looked like something from a magazine. Soft music floated through the air. Children laughed between rows of white chairs. the scent of fresh flowers mixed with the smell of barbecue drifting from the reception area. Emma looked breathtaking. She wore her grandmother's pearl earrings, the same pair Evelyn had saved for this day since our daughter was 16. When I took Emma's arm to walk her down the aisle, she squeezed my hand. "Nervous?" I whispered. She smiled through happy tears. "The good kind." I kissed her forehead. "You deserve every happiness this world can offer." For one brief moment, I believed those words. Then I looked at Ethan. He stood waiting with a flawless smile, his eyes shining just enough to convince everyone he was emotional. Guests wiped away tears. Even the pastor smiled. But I couldn't ignore what I saw. His expression changed too perfectly. Every smile, every tear, every nod. It was almost as if he'd rehearsed each emotion in front of a mirror. I hated myself for thinking it. So I buried the feeling once again. Maybe I was just another stubborn father struggling to let go of his youngest daughter. I prayed that was true. Marriage seemed to suit them, at least from the outside. Emma glowed whenever she talked about Ethan. They traveled, hosted dinner parties, filled social media with smiling vacation photos and anniversary messages. Everyone admired them. Everyone. Except me. Every time Ethan visited our home, I noticed the same strange pattern. He rarely stayed in one room. If everyone gathered in the living room, he'd quietly excuse himself. "I'll grab another drink. I need the restroom." I left my phone somewhere, harmless reasons, except they happened every single visit. One afternoon during a family barbecue, I watched him disappear down the hallway. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. Long enough that curiosity tugged at me. When he returned, he smiled casually. "Sorry, had to answer a work call." Funny thing was, his phone never rang. That evening I mentioned it to Evelyn. "You notice how Ethan keeps wandering around the house?" She shrugged. "Maybe he's just making himself comfortable. Comfortable people don't inspect hallways." She laughed softly. "You always expect the worst." "No, I expect people to eventually show me who they really are." She reached across the couch and squeezed my hand. "One day you'll learn to trust people a little more." I smiled. I hope so. Deep inside I wasn't so sure. About a year after the wedding, my oldest daughter Claire called unexpectedly. It was nearly 11 at night. Claire never called that late, especially not on a Tuesday. The moment I answered, I knew something was wrong. "Dad, just one word." Her voice sounded strained. "What happened?" I asked. She took a long breath. "I need you to promise me something. I don't like promises before questions. Please, I need your word that you'll listen until I'm finished." A cold sensation crawled up my spine. "I promise." Silence. Then she spoke. "I saw Ethan." "So?" "He wasn't alone." My grip tightened around the phone. "Where?" "A restaurant downtown." "Business meeting?" "No." Her answer came immediately. I watched them for almost 20 minutes. Every muscle in my body became perfectly still. He kept holding her hand. My heartbeat slowed. Not faster. Slower, he brushed her hair behind her ear. Silence, they kissed before leaving. I closed my eyes. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Claire continued quietly. I wanted to believe there was another explanation. There wasn't. I've never seen Emma so happy. I didn't know how to tell you. For nearly a minute, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked one question. "Does Emma know?" "No." I looked toward the bedroom where Evelyn slept peacefully, completely unaware that our family's future had just shifted beneath our feet. Claire whispered carefully, "Dad, please don't do anything stupid." I stood by the window watching the moonlight spill across the backyard. My reflection stared back at me in the glass. Calm, cold, thinking. Then I answered with the quietest voice she'd ever heard. "I'm not going to do anything emotional." I paused. "I'm going to do something permanent." Because at that moment, I knew two things with absolute certainty. First, my instincts had been right all along. And second, if Ethan Brooks was capable of betraying my daughter so effortlessly, then cheating was probably only the beginning. People think betrayal reveals itself with one dramatic moment. It doesn't. It whispers. It hides behind excuses. It survives, because decent people want to believe the best in others. But once someone shows you the edge of their mask, you start noticing every crack. I didn't confront Ethan. I didn't call Emma. I didn't storm into his office or threaten him over the phone. That would have been exactly what he expected. A guilty man prepares for anger. He rarely prepares for silence. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise and poured myself a cup of black coffee. I sat alone on the back porch, while the first rays of light filtered through the oak trees. The birds were singing. The neighborhood was peaceful. Yet inside my chest, a quiet war had already begun. If Claire was right and I trusted my oldest daughter with my life then, Ethan wasn't just living a lie. He was living two lives. And men who can successfully manage two lives usually have something much bigger to hide. I intended to find out exactly what it was. The first person I called wasn't a lawyer. It wasn't the police. It was my middle daughter, Natalie. If Claire had inherited my stubbornness, Natalie had inherited my patience. She analyzed everything. Nothing escaped her. "Natalie," I said, after she answered, "can you and Ryan come over Saturday?" Her voice immediately changed. "Is this about Ethan?" I hesitated. "Just long enough. I'll explain when you're here. We'll be there." She didn't ask another question. She already knew. Saturday afternoon arrived with heavy gray clouds hanging over Tampa. Natalie and her husband Ryan pulled into the driveway carrying two black equipment cases. Ryan worked in corporate security, surveillance systems, access control, digital investigations. The kind of man who understood cameras better than most people understood televisions. After Evelyn left to meet a friend for lunch, I told them everything. Claire's phone call, the restaurant, the affair, the strange way Ethan wandered through our house every time he visited. Ryan listened without interrupting. When I finished, he folded his hands together. "Daniel, where's your office?" I pointed down the hallway. "The last room." "You keep important documents there?" "I do." "A safe?" I nodded slowly. His expression hardened. "How often is Ethan alone in this house?" "Every football Sunday." Ryan looked toward Natalie. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Then he turned back toward me. "I don't think he's just sneaking around. I think he's looking for something." A cold knot formed in my stomach. My safe? It's possible. I stared toward the hallway. Suddenly every strange trip, every unnecessary walk, every casual excuse, they all fit together like pieces of a puzzle I'd refused to assemble. Ryan opened one of the equipment cases. Inside sat several tiny cameras. None looked like cameras. One was hidden inside a decorative wall clock. Another inside what appeared to be a smoke detector. A third looked exactly like an ordinary phone charger. "If someone isn't specifically searching for them," Ryan explained, "they'll never know these exist." He spent the next 3 hours installing everything. One camera overlooked my office desk. Another covered the hallway leading to the study. A third captured anyone entering through the side hallway. Every recording uploaded automatically to encrypted cloud storage. Even if someone destroyed every camera, the evidence would survive. When Ryan finished, he handed me my phone. "Whenever motion is detected, you'll know." I looked down at the surveillance app. For a long moment, I hoped we'd wasted an entire Saturday. I hoped Ethan would prove me wrong. Ryan placed a hand on my shoulder. "What happens if we catch him?" I looked toward the family photos hanging across the hallway. Emma smiling at graduation, our family vacations, birthday parties, Christmas mornings. Everything Ethan had pretended to value. "I'm not interested in catching him," Ryan frowned. "I'm interested in understanding him. Because once you truly understand someone, you know exactly where they'll make their biggest mistake." 3 days later, my phone rang. Ethan Brooks. His cheerful voice filled the speaker. "Hey, Daniel. Emma's having dinner with some friends Saturday. I was wondering if you'd like to watch the game together." I smiled. "Absolutely. I'll even make your favorite barbecue ribs." He laughed. "Perfect. I'll bring the beer." After hanging up, I slowly opened the camera app one more time. Everything was working perfectly. Every angle, every hallway, every entrance. For the first time since Claire's phone call, I felt completely calm. Because predators are dangerous until they become predictable. And Ethan had just scheduled the very day he intended to walk into my house again. He thought he was coming over to watch football. He had no idea he was about to step onto a stage where every move would be recorded. Saturday arrived warm and quiet. The kind of afternoon that makes you believe nothing bad could possibly happen. The smell of slow-cooked barbecue drifted through the backyard. The television was already tuned to the football pregame show. Evelyn moved around the kitchen humming softly as she prepared dinner, completely unaware that every camera in the house was waiting for one man. At exactly 2:00 p.m., the doorbell rang. Right on time. Of course it did. Ethan Brooks never liked being late. He stepped inside carrying a six-pack of imported beer and wearing that same polished smile I'd seen the day Emma introduced him to us. "Daniel," he said cheerfully, "I hope you're ready to lose today." I laughed. "Son, I've survived raising 3 daughters. A football game doesn't scare me." He grinned. For anyone watching, we looked like the perfect father-in-law and son-in-law. But beneath every laugh, both of us were playing a very different game. The afternoon unfolded exactly as it always had. We argued over bad referee calls, shouted at the television, shared stories, drank beer. Ethan blended into the rhythm of our family so naturally that anyone walking into the room would have believed he belonged there. That was his greatest talent. He knew how to become exactly the person everyone expected him to be. Evelyn eventually stood, stretched her arms, and smiled. "I'm heading upstairs to read." She kissed my forehead. "Don't stay up all night watching football." "I'll try." She smiled at Ethan. "Good night." "Good night, Mrs. Carter." The bedroom door closed down the hallway. Now it was just the two of us. Exactly as planned. I waited another 10 minutes, long enough for the house to become completely still. Then I yawned. A slow, deliberate, convincing yawn. I leaned farther back into my recliner, rubbed my eyes, pulled a blanket over my lap. "These old bones aren't what they used to be," I muttered with a tired chuckle. Ethan laughed. "Need a nap? I'll close my eyes for a few minutes. Wake me if anything exciting happens." "No problem," he said. "Get some rest." I closed my eyes. Then I slowed my breathing. Deep, even, relaxed. The breathing of a man who had fallen asleep 1,000 times before. Minutes passed. The television commentators filled the room with meaningless chatter. Ice clinked softly against Ethan's glass. A bag of chips crinkled. Nothing unusual. Not yet. Then I heard it. The soft creak of the sofa. Footsteps, slow, careful. Not toward the kitchen. Not toward the guest bathroom. Toward the hallway. My hallway. I remained perfectly still. Inside my shirt pocket, my phone vibrated once. Motion detected. Without opening my eyes fully, I slipped my phone into my hand beneath the blanket. I opened the security app. The live video appeared instantly. There he was. Crystal clear. Ethan quietly entered my office. His expression had completely changed. The friendly smile was gone. So was the easygoing charm. Now his face looked cold. Focused, professional. He wasn't wandering. He wasn't curious. He knew exactly why he was there. He walked straight to my desk. Didn't hesitate. Didn't search. Didn't look around. His hand immediately reached the top drawer. My pulse remained steady. He pulled it open. His fingers moved directly to the hidden compartment beneath the drawer. He found it. On the first try. A chill spread across my shoulders. No hesitation meant only one thing. He'd already discovered it before. This wasn't his first visit. It was simply his latest. Slowly, he lifted the false bottom. There they were. The safe keys. Exactly where I'd left them. He stared at them for several seconds. His eyes narrowed. His lips barely moved as though silently calculating something. Not stealing today. Planning. Confirming. Making sure nothing had changed before returning for the real job. Then, incredibly, he smiled. A tiny smile. The smile of a man convinced he was smarter than everyone else. He carefully replaced the keys, closed the compartment, shut the drawer exactly as he'd found it. Not a fingerprint out of place. Not a sound. If there hadn't been cameras, no one would have ever known he'd entered that room. I quietly locked my phone, slipped it back into my pocket, closed my eyes again. 2 minutes later, the footsteps returned. The couch creaked. The football game continued. Everything looked perfectly normal. "Wake up, Daniel," Ethan chuckled. "You slept through the best touchdown of the game." I stretched dramatically and rubbed my eyes. "Did I? You always miss the exciting parts." I smiled. "Maybe." Then I looked straight into his eyes. "You'd be surprised what I notice, even when people think I'm asleep." For the briefest fraction of a second, his smile faltered. Only a heartbeat. Then it returned. But it was enough. Enough to tell me he suddenly wasn't quite as comfortable as before. He had no idea why. He only knew something felt different, and he was right, because the game between us had just changed forever. That night, after Ethan drove away believing he'd fooled me once again, I sat alone in my office and replayed the footage over and over. The evidence was undeniable. But deep down, I couldn't shake one terrifying thought. If he wasn't stealing the documents that day, then what exactly was he waiting for? I was about to find out. And the truth was far worse than I had imagined. Some betrayals break your heart. Others make your blood run cold. When I first learned Ethan was cheating on Emma, I thought I'd discovered the worst thing a husband could do. I was wrong. Infidelity was only the smoke. The real fire was still burning beneath it. 4 days after I recorded Ethan inside my office, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed only one name: Marcus Reed. Marcus wasn't the kind of private investigator who advertised on billboards or television. He had spent years uncovering corporate fraud before opening his own discreet investigation firm. He was the man businesses hired when millions of dollars disappeared without anyone noticing. More importantly, he was a man who dealt only in facts. No rumors, no assumptions, only evidence. "Can you meet?" he asked. "I have enough." Those 3 words tightened every muscle in my body. "I'll be there." An hour later, I slid into a quiet booth at a small diner on the edge of town. Marcus was already waiting. A thick brown folder rested on the table between us. He didn't smile. He simply pushed the folder toward me. "I think you should sit down before you open it." "I already am. You'll understand what I mean." I opened the file. The very first photograph hit me like a punch. There was Ethan, walking hand in hand with another woman through a shopping district. Different clothes. Different day. Different location. The next photo showed them kissing outside a luxury hotel. Another showed them laughing together at an expensive waterfront restaurant. Another. The dates stretched back almost 18 months. Not weeks. Not months. A year and a half. He hadn't made one terrible mistake. He had built an entirely separate life. Marcus quietly sipped his coffee while I continued turning pages. "Does she know he's married?" He shook his head. "Every interview I conducted points to the same conclusion. She believes she's dating a successful bachelor." I stared at the photographs. "So he lied to both women." Marcus nodded. "Professionals like Ethan rarely tell one lie. They create entire realities." I slowly closed my eyes. Emma had spent those same 18 months planning birthdays, celebrating anniversaries, dreaming about children, while her husband was promising forever to someone else. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt genuine anger. Not the explosive kind. The quiet kind. The dangerous kind. Then Marcus slid another stack of documents toward me. "This," he said softly, "is the real reason I asked you to meet in person." I frowned. I thought the affair was the reason. It isn't. He tapped the paperwork. "This is." I looked down. Investment statements. Property records. Financial transaction reports. Bank transfers. At first they looked ordinary. Then Marcus began explaining them. "Your daughter inherited money from her grandmother." "Correct. You kept copies of the investment documents inside your office safe." I slowly nodded. Only family knew that. Marcus looked directly into my eyes. Ethan knew too. The diner suddenly felt silent. Even the conversations around us seemed to disappear. Marcus continued. "My financial analyst traced unusual activity surrounding Emma's investment portfolio. It wasn't random. It was targeted." He laid several highlighted pages across the table. Someone accessed confidential information. Information that wasn't public. Information stored inside your safe. A heavy weight settled onto my chest. I didn't need him to finish. I already understood. Ethan hadn't been sneaking into my office out of curiosity. He'd been stealing information. Using private financial records to benefit outside investors. Profiting from his own wife's inheritance. I looked at Marcus. "Are you telling me he robbed my daughter?" Marcus answered without hesitation. "Yes, and based on everything we've uncovered, he planned to keep doing it." I couldn't speak. For several long seconds I simply stared at the documents. Every sacrifice Evelyn and I had made. Every overtime shift. Every dollar we'd saved. Emma's grandmother's final gift. Everything. Reduced to numbers on a page by a man who claimed to love her. Marcus leaned forward. "Daniel, this isn't just immoral. If these findings hold up under legal review, it could become a criminal matter." That single sentence changed everything. Until that moment, I'd been thinking like a father. Now, I had to think like a strategist. Emotion could wait. Evidence couldn't. I carefully closed the folder. How solid is all this? Marcus didn't hesitate. Solid enough that I'd testify under oath. Solid enough that any competent attorney will know exactly what they're looking at. I nodded slowly. Good. He studied my face. You've already made up your mind. I have. What are you going to do? I looked out the diner window as rain began tapping softly against the glass. I'm not warning him. I'm not threatening him. I'm going to let him believe he's still winning. Marcus smiled for the first time all afternoon. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. Because predators become careless when they think no one is hunting them. And Ethan Brooks still believed he was the smartest man in the room. He had no idea. I had already begun building the courtroom that would become his prison. For an entire week I said nothing. No angry phone calls. No accusations. No hints that I knew anything. I wanted Ethan comfortable, confident, relaxed. A man who believes he's safe always makes one final mistake. And I intended to let him make it. The first person I contacted wasn't Emma. It was my attorney. Rebecca Lawson had spent more than 20 years handling financial fraud and high-conflict family cases. She wasn't impressed by emotions. She was impressed by evidence. When I placed the investigator's report, the security footage, and the financial records on her desk, she spent nearly 2 hours reviewing every page without interruption. Finally, she looked up. Daniel, you've done this exactly right. I exhaled slowly. So we have enough? She nodded. More than enough. But from this point forward, everything has to be handled carefully. She explained how every document would be copied, every video secured, every timeline verified. Nothing could be left to interpretation. By the time Ethan realized what was happening, every piece of evidence would already be in the hands of people he couldn't manipulate. Exactly what I wanted. When I left Rebecca's office, I made only one phone call. To Evelyn. Honey, I need you to invite everyone over for Sunday dinner. She laughed softly. That's all? No, I want the good china. Silence. Then her voice became serious. It's time, isn't it? Yes, I'll make Emma's favorite lemon rosemary chicken. And? Tell everyone not to cancel. She didn't ask another question. After 33 years together, she knew. Over the next few days, I called each of my daughters separately. Claire agreed immediately. Natalie simply said, "We'll be there." Neither asked for details. They trusted me. Emma answered last. Hi, Dad. Her cheerful voice almost broke my heart. What are you doing Sunday? Nothing planned. Good. Your mother wants the whole family together. I'll bring Ethan. I forced myself to smile. Please do. After hanging up, I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at my reflection in the window. This would be the last normal conversation I'd ever have with my youngest daughter. Sunday evening arrived. Golden sunlight poured through the dining room windows. The entire house smelled of garlic, rosemary, butter, and fresh bread. Everything looked warm, comfortable, safe, exactly like every other family dinner we'd shared over the years. Claire and her husband arrived first. Natalie and Ryan followed shortly afterward. Finally, the front door opened. Emma walked in smiling. Ethan followed close behind carrying a bottle of expensive wine. Evening, everyone. He hugged Evelyn, shook my hand, complimented the smell of dinner, laughed with Claire, joked with Ryan about football. If an Oscar existed for pretending, he deserved one. Watching him perform was almost fascinating. He had absolutely no idea he was walking into the worst evening of his life. Dinner unfolded beautifully. Everyone talked over one another. Stories filled the room. Laughter echoed off the walls. Emma looked happier than she'd been in months. Seeing that smile hurt more than I expected, because I knew, in a few minutes, it would disappear. Forever, when dessert plates were cleared away, I quietly reached beneath my chair. The room slowly settled into silence. I'd like everyone to see something. Emma looked confused. Dad? I placed my tablet in the center of the table, face up. Then I pressed play. The first video filled the screen. High-definition footage. Timestamp clearly visible. Ethan walking into my office. Opening my desk drawer. Removing the hidden compartment. Staring directly at the safe keys. No explanation. No misunderstanding. Only truth. Nobody spoke. The room became impossibly still. Ethan's face lost every trace of color. He stared at the screen. Then at me. Then back at the screen. Finally, he forced out a nervous laugh. Daniel, I can explain. I calmly raised one finger. Not yet. I swiped to the next file. Photograph after photograph appeared. Ethan holding another woman's hand, kissing her, vacationing with her, smiling at her. Nearly 18 months of betrayal, displayed one image at a time. Emma stopped breathing. Her lips trembled. No, she whispered. No. Claire reached across the table and gently took her sister's hand. Ethan leaned forward desperately. Emma, listen to me, it's not what it looks like. I looked directly into his eyes. Really? Then tell us. What exactly does it look like? He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Because liars rehearse conversations. They don't rehearse evidence. Then I opened the final presentation. The financial records. The timeline. The security footage. The stolen information. The investment documents. Everything. One perfectly organized chain leading directly back to him. I looked at Emma. Your inheritance. The money your grandmother left you. He used information stolen from my safe to help other people profit from it. Emma slowly turned toward her husband. Her eyes weren't angry anymore. They were empty. Cold. You stole from me? Her voice barely rose above a whisper. You stole? From your own wife? Ethan looked around the table searching for someone, anyone, who might defend him. There was no one. Only 6 people who loved Emma more than they ever loved him. He realized it. I watched the exact moment hope disappeared from his face. Emma stood up. Calmly, gracefully, without screaming. Without throwing anything. She looked directly at the man she'd promised to spend her life with. Then she spoke 6 words that ended everything. Get out of my father's house. The room remained silent as Ethan slowly picked up his jacket. Nobody stopped him. Nobody followed him. The front door opened, then closed. The sound echoed through the entire house. Emma stared at the empty doorway for several seconds before turning back toward me. Tears streamed silently down her face. How long have you known? I reached across the table and gently held her trembling hand, long enough to make sure he could never hurt you again. People imagine revenge as a moment, a punch, a scream, a slammed door. They're wrong. Real justice isn't loud. It arrives quietly, then stays forever. For a long moment after Ethan walked out, no one moved. The dining room, once filled with laughter only minutes earlier, felt frozen in time. The ticking clock on the wall suddenly sounded louder than ever. Emma remained standing beside her chair, staring at the front door as if her mind still couldn't accept what her eyes had just witnessed. Then, slowly, she sat down. Not because she was weak, because her legs could no longer carry the weight of betrayal. I walked around the table and knelt beside her. She looked at me with tears silently running down her cheeks. Dad. Her voice cracked. You knew. I suspected. I answered gently. I only knew after I had proof. She swallowed hard. You didn't tell me. I wanted to. Every single day. I paused before continuing. But if I had come to you with only my suspicions, Ethan would have lied. He would have twisted everything. And because you loved him, you would have believed him. Emma closed her eyes. After several seconds, she whispered, You're right. I would have defended him. The words hurt her almost as much as Ethan's betrayal. Claire and Natalie wrapped their arms around their little sister. The 3 girls stood together exactly the way they had when they were children. Only now, life had reminded them why family mattered. Evelyn quietly placed a cup of tea in front of Emma. No speeches. No advice. Just love. Sometimes, silence comforts more than words ever can. The next morning, Rebecca filed everything. Every photograph. Every financial record. Every surveillance video. Every statement. The evidence was so complete that Ethan's attorney quickly realized denial wasn't an option. Within days, the excuses began. It was a misunderstanding. The investments were complicated. I never intended to hurt anyone. Then came the apologies. Long emails. Voicemails. Messages asking for one conversation. Emma never answered a single one. Not because she hated him. Because she was finally done listening. Several weeks later, Ethan called me. His voice sounded different. Smaller. Less confident. Daniel, I'd like to meet. No, please, I've made mistakes. I know. I just want to explain. I looked out across my backyard, where Evelyn was planting flowers beneath the old oak tree. For the first time in months, the house felt peaceful again. There isn't anything left to explain. Daniel, you welcomed me into your family. I know. You trusted me. I know. I loved Emma. I finally spoke. No. You loved what Emma could give you. There's a difference. Silence. Then he tried one last time. Can we at least settle this privately? I smiled. The moment you stole from my daughter, you gave up the right to ask for privacy. I ended the call. He never contacted me again. The divorce moved quickly. The financial investigation continued. Thanks to the evidence, Emma recovered a significant portion of her inheritance. She moved into a beautiful new apartment overlooking the bay. Claire helped decorate it. Natalie installed an advanced security system before Emma even unpacked her first box. Typical Natalie. Evelyn filled the kitchen with homemade meals every weekend until Emma finally laughed again. Not the polite laugh she'd forced during those painful weeks. The real one. The laugh she'd had since she was 6 years old. The sound filled my heart in a way I can't describe. Because no father wants revenge. A father wants his child to smile again. That was my victory. Months later, Emma and I sat together on the back porch watching the sunset. The warm Florida breeze rustled the oak leaves overhead. She sipped sweet tea before quietly asking, "Dad, were you ever afraid I'd hate you for investigating Ethan?" I smiled. "Every day." She looked surprised. "I thought maybe you'd believe I was trying to control your life." Emma reached over and squeezed my hand. "You weren't controlling me. You were protecting me." We sat together watching the sky turn shades of orange and purple. After a while, she asked, "What did you learn from all this?" I thought about it carefully. Then I answered, "Never confuse patience with weakness. The loudest person in the room usually wants attention. The quiet person is usually paying attention." She smiled. "I think I'm becoming more like you." I laughed. "Just don't become too much like me." "Why?" "Because sometimes you have to stop watching and start living." She leaned her head against my shoulder exactly the way she used to when she was a little girl. For the first time since this nightmare began, everything felt whole again. If there's one lesson this story teaches, it's this. Betrayal may hide behind charm. Deception may wear a perfect smile. But truth is patient. It doesn't panic. It doesn't rush. And eventually, truth always walks into the light. Ethan Brooks believed he was the smartest man in every room he entered. He thought an aging father was too trusting, too quiet, too slow. He couldn't have been more wrong. Because while he spent years building lies, I spent a few months building the truth. And in the end, the truth destroyed everything his lies had built. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another unforgettable revenge story. And now tell me in the comments, if you had been in Daniel's place, would you have confronted Ethan immediately, or would you have patiently gathered evidence just like he did? Until next time, remember, karma may take its time, but it never forgets. The end.